Big day tomorrow, autumn statement. What are you going to be looking out for?
The key for us is to look at whether the government are making fair choices where it comes to taxation in particular. So we'd be doing things differently, whether it's ending that non-dom tax status, charging VAT on private schools, putting that money into state education. There's a lot of areas, really, that the government have got some straightforward choices, I think, around fairness, but also on growth. You know, we've had terrible growth these last 12 years as a country. Obviously, we're facing particularly acute pressures at the moment on the cost of living because the Conservatives crashed the economy, and the fact we're having tomorrow is as a result of that failure. But this isn't just a more recent problem. We've had a terrible record as a country on growth, and Labour's Green Prosperity Plan is about delivering that growth with high-paid, good jobs, secure jobs in every corner of our country.
You say that it's because the Conservatives crashed the economy. It's a bit more complicated than that, though, isn't it? We're obviously not, completely negating the impact of the mini-budget, but we are seeing a global inflation crisis. We're seeing a war in Ukraine. We're seeing what happened with Putin as well. They
crashed the economy and they've mismanaged it for 12 years. So if you've been in charge for 12 years, you've had a long time to make choices about the direction of our country. I mean, undeniably, there are global factors. Of course, every country is confronted with some of this, but that doesn't explain why we're bottom of the pile where it comes to growth. We're uniquely exposed as a country going into this crisis, the fact that we are so dependent. Our energy security, we don't have that independence of supply, and part of Labour's plan is about making sure that in future we're not so exposed to those kinds of global fluctuations. But this is squarely on them. The fact that people are going to be paying more on their mortgages every month is because of the decisions of the Conservative Party.
Jeremy Hunt's been pretty upfront that there is going to be a public spending squeeze as well. There's been strong hints that the NHS is going to be protected, that the pensions triple lock is going to be protected, that benefits will be rising in line with inflation. Are you a bit worried about what that means for education, your department?
I'm incredibly worried about the pressure that our schools are under at the moment. And when I speak to heads, when I speak to teachers and support staff, they are doing amazing work, working so hard. But the challenges and the pressure, they see it every day with children arriving at school who haven't had that good start that they need, where their families are struggling to give them the best. That's why Labour would deliver breakfast clubs for every primary school child, so they get a good start to the day. But the pressures that schools are under, having to make decisions about whether they're going to have to lose staff or whether they can afford to give children the basics. I think one really straightforward way that the government could fill some of that would be to end the tax benefits that private schools enjoy. And
how much money does that raise, though?
That raises £1.7 billion.
It's not going to really touch the science, is it?
I think it would make a big difference. You look at the number of teachers that you could recruit, 6,500 new teachers, better mental health support in our schools, careers guidance for all of our children. It gets you a lot. And I don't think you can go around saying that you've got choices to make and not consider the really straightforward, easy choices. There is no justification for that kind of taxpayer subsidy of private schools. And it's the opportunity for the Chancellor on Thursday to end that and to put that money into the schools that support the vast majority of our children.
You've talked about the pressures that we're under, whether it's inflation, but also, of course, borrowing and borrowing costs. Are there any areas of public spending where you think, actually, yes, this is where we could look at finding spend savings?
I think it's quite tough. I mean, there has been a big squeeze over the last 12 years. I mean, we do believe that you need to make sure you're getting value for money. That's why we've said that Labour would set up the Office for Value for Money to make sure that we're getting real value from every pound.
Are there any areas where you think that, look, maybe this, if we have to make difficult choices, this is the department where maybe they could fall?
There will, no government is perfect in how it spends its money. And of course, you should be looking at getting the best out of the money that you're spending. But I don't think, if I look, for example, across education, it's not that they are awash with money and have got more money than they know what to do with. I mean, unlike the oil and gas companies who haven't actually been taxed for what they have been enjoying at the moment. So I think all of this comes down to choices for government, both in terms of priorities, but also tax fairness. You can't just...
That is the key, though, isn't it? The choices for government, which I guess is why I'm asking, if there is any areas where you think savings could be found.
Well, I'd always be open to looking for it, but I think given the pressures that our public sector has been under these last 12 years, whether it's our schools or hospitals, an awful lot has been cut back, and cut back to such a point that, for example, with schools, they're the last line of defence, really, for so many of our communities. That wider infrastructure, that wider support that families need, that's gone. Okay. And so much of it falls to schools. So actually, if you had to free up, if you had to get high standards and excellence in all of our schools, you could deliver that far more effectively if you had that wider support available to all families, so that it doesn't always just fall to our teachers and school leaders.
I want to ask you about Dominic Raab, who obviously is facing allegations of bullying, and there's going to be an independent investigation into his conduct. He says he welcomes it, he'll comply. Are you satisfied with that?
Well, we don't know who as yet is to lead this independent inquiry. Of course, the Prime Minister hasn't appointed his independent ethics advisor. He promised us a government that would be rooted in integrity, professionalism and accountability. This falls a long way short, but it's not just about Dominic Raab. You look at Suella Braverman back in the Cabinet, having breached the ministerial code on an issue of national security, Gavin Williamson put back into government. I think this speaks to a deeper question as to Rishi Sunak's character and also his weakness, that he feels so weak within his own party, that he is doing what he feels is right by his party. It should be about what's right for the country. That isn't what's happening right now.
I just wonder if you think it also speaks to a deeper problem in Westminster and like trying to sort of take the kind of party politics out of this. Sky News has a podcast where two of our reporters have been looking into allegations of bullying, the Open Secret podcast, and they found examples across all parties. One staffer telling them, I'm sure every staffer in Parliament has got a story, even if they weren't bullied, they know someone who was. I mean, is there a problem with bullying and the treatment of staff in Westminster?
I think you get real problems where you have an imbalance of power and where people don't feel able to make complaints. And that for too long has been the case in Westminster. And, we do have a process now, and I hope that people will come forward where they have been on the end of poor treatment in the workplace, because no matter where you work, you should be treated with respect and you shouldn't be subjected to bullying. And the same is true, of course, right across government as well. And sometimes people don't feel comfortable coming forward. They want to try and just plough on and do their best, but no one should feel under that kind of pressure. And I think you do see what happens when you have a more open culture where people do feel that they can come forward. We've got more work to do in Westminster, absolutely. But I think it does come down to that dynamic around the imbalance of power. And, we all of us as politicians have a responsibility to make sure that we are respectful of others. Politics can involve, robust exchange. That's as it should be. But you don't cross that line.
Thank you very much for being on the programme.
Thank you.